Good morning, everybody. As quiet as a church. Good morning, welcome. My name is Don Bliss. I'm currently the president of the United Nations Association for the National Capital Area for a couple of more months. My successor, Steve Mosley, is the president-elect, sitting over there next to Paula Boland, our executive director. Youth Observer to the United Nations, Nicole Perez. Mr. Secretary General, Steve Mirabello. Friends and supporters. On behalf of the United Nations Association of the National Capital Area, it is my privilege to convene this NCA's 13th Global Classrooms Model United Nations Conference at the U.S. Department of State. This is the culminating event of a year-long global classroom programming in the middle and high schools of the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Now I'm going to say a few thank yous up front, so please hold your applause till I'm finished, okay? Let me begin by thanking our partners, the U.S. Department of State, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Acting Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs, Tracy Ann Jacobson, Public Affairs Director Mark Schlechter, the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization for hosting this event. And incidentally, please read the message from Secretary General Antonio Guterres and from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in your program. I also want to give special thanks to our NCA staff, led by Executive Director Paula Boland, Vice President for Education and Programs Jesse Nicholson, and especially our Director of Global Education, Megan Penn, who's sitting right here, Nicole Bohanahan, the Program Manager, and the many Global Classroom Program Assistants who are listed in your program. We are most grateful to the teachers, policy advisors, and rapporteurs, and the hundreds of volunteers who have worked the year round to make this day possible. And a special shout out to our sponsors and donors, the United Nations Federal Credit Union, the Coulterfied Foundation, Air Shot, the National Education Association, the law firm of O'Melveny & Myers, Connected, Morgan Stanley, the Blue Dorn and Schott Foundations, Trader Joe's, Starbucks Coffee, and individual sponsors who are listed in your program. Thank you, all of you. And most importantly, I want to thank you, the delegates, who have been selected because you have worked hard and demonstrated your skills in analysis, advocacy, and negotiation. Great work. Now let's give our supporters, our partners, and yourselves a big hand, okay? Now, delegates, the issues you address in this conference, the situation in Somalia, rising sea levels, human rights of refugees, access to primary education, and technology for sustainable city development, these are complex and challenging issues. You are here because you understand the challenges that your generation will face as you complete your education and embark upon your careers in this interconnected global community in which we all live, this small, fragile planet hurtling through space. As tomorrow's leaders, you will need to think globally and act both globally and locally. You, fellow delegates, understand that the United States is not a self-contained, isolated landmass protected by two great oceans. The challenges we face are truly global in nature. Nuclear proliferation, terrorism, pandemic diseases, ethnic and religious conflict, rising tides of migration and refugees, cybersecurity, an integrated global economy, climate change, limited water and food resources, extreme poverty, and growing economic inequality. These challenges do not stop at sovereign borders. The United States cannot solve these problems alone. They can only be addressed successfully through global cooperation. And the United Nations is the global institution that engages almost every sovereign nation in addressing these challenges. In its 72nd year, the United Nations has never been more needed than it is today. In 1945, the Allied victors in World War II, that greatest generation of many of your great-grandfathers and grandmothers, met in San Francisco to draft the United Nations Charter. This was largely a United States initiative and embraced values and rights to which we all aspire, maybe not fully have achieved, but we all aspire as a nation. To quote from the preamble of the United Nations Charter, we recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every human person, the equality of men and women, respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. Very powerful values that are the foundation of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, the world has changed a lot since 1945, and the mission and work of the United Nations has expanded, first, to provide humanitarian assistance to record numbers of refugees and persons displaced by human and natural causes. Second, to set goals that will mobilize governments, civil society, and the private sector to eliminate extreme poverty and uplift global standards of living. Third, to work and advocate for basic human rights. And fourth, to work for peace and security around the world. Today, more than 100,000 UN peacekeepers, blue helmets, from 125 countries serve in 16 conflict zones on 4 continents, keeping the peace. They're the world's largest military deployment. Through its many programs and specialized agencies, the United Nations works 24/7 to facilitate global cooperation and make this a better world. Now, to make sure you're not sleeping, I'm going to ask for your participation in a second. How many of you, let's have a show of hands, have flown to another country by airline, by some airline? Show of hands. Oh, a lot of you have traveled internationally. That's great. Okay. Now, how many of you have heard of ICAO or IWASI, if you use the French? How many of you have heard of ICAO or IWASI? And you're the experts on the United Nations, right? I don't see too many hands. That's the International Civil Aviation Organization. Now, when you took your international flight, did you arrive safely at your destination, both on your departure and your return? And were the pilot and ground control well trained and able to communicate in the same language? Yes, they were. And why? Because 194 member states are members of the International Civil Aviation Organization, a UN organization that sets global safety standards and security standards for international aviation. Statistics show that you were safer on that international flight than you were driving to and from the airport. Now, if I had time, I could give you many, many examples of the life-saving and quality-enhancing work of the United Nations, from postal and telecommunications services, from weather forecasting, to fair and efficient trade, to disease prevention, to feeding 90 million hungry people. As we sit here tonight, there are 5 large ships at sea, 27 aircraft in the sky, and 5,000 trucks on the ground delivering food to hungry and starving people in 80 different countries through the World Food Program. The United Nations vaccinates over 40% of the world's children. We have eliminated smallpox, and we are on the verge of eliminating polio. Now, we at UNA-NCA will be the first to acknowledge that the United Nations is not a perfect institution. Like any valuable enterprise, it needs to adapt to changing circumstances. We are fortunate that the new Secretary General is committed to improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the United Nations and is prepared to work closely with the United States to achieve this result. History teaches us that U.S. leadership at the United Nations is critical to its success. With the Security Council veto, the U.S. has been given extraordinary power, and with that power comes responsibility. Responsibility to meet our funding obligations, which are much less than 1% of the total U.S. federal budget, and responsibility to lead by example and to work for universal human rights at home and abroad. We should be grateful that the United Nations chose New York City for its headquarters. Few Americans realize that the economic benefits to the U.S. alone are the equivalent of 7 Super Bowls each year. Yet the symbolic value is even greater, and we must live up to the high honor that this represents. Last year, the General Assembly called upon all of us to set achievable goals for the international community over the next 15 years, working with civil society and the private sector to make measurable progress on such issues as the empowerment of girls and women, providing universal quality education and access to health care and good sanitation, and the eradication of extreme poverty. My fellow delegates, it will be your responsibility, the responsibility of your generation, to make this vision a reality. As you pursue your education and embark upon your careers, we hope that you will continue to be members of UNA-NCA as we work to educate the American public and U.S. policymakers on the work of the United Nations. We have a strong network of young professionals who help each other advance their international careers, and we have many programs that highlight the work and potential of the United Nations. Come join us. So thank you, delegates. Thank you for getting an early start on the responsibilities you will bear as we pass this torch to the next generation of leaders. We are counting on you. We are confident that you will do a better job than my generation has in leaving this world a better place than you found it. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce Megan Penn, UNA-NCA's Director of Global Education.
Thank you, Ambassador Bliss. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Come on, I know we were all here early. My team was here around 6:30. Let's try again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Perfect. I'm so glad that all 600 of you were able to get through here and through security, no less. That's quite an achievement in itself, and we're happy to have you. I'd like to welcome you to the 13th Annual Global Classrooms DC Model United Nations Conference at the U.S. Department of State and Pan American Health Organization. I would personally like to thank the wonderful individuals in the Bureau of International Organization Affairs at the State Department and PAHO for all your support and partnership over the years and leading up to the planning of this event. It is truly a wonderful and unique experience to be able to discuss the issues of today in locations that are as important as the discussions themselves. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you download the Connected GCDC conference app. This was kindly created and donated by Connected Inc. The app has awesome features such as the electronic schedule for the day, can be used for interacting with other attendees and delegates, and also be utilized to share videos and photos that you may take throughout the day. Throughout the day, we'll also be having a friendly competition and prizes for those individuals who have the highest number of likes on a post and those who post the highest number of legitimate and appropriate posts throughout the day. Information on how to download the app can be found on the back of your program. Also, for those who have downloaded and checked in with registration, you may have noticed a few changes in the schedule for today, both in timing and room assignments. If not, I'll go over a few of those changes now. The first committee will now be starting at 10:50 a.m., and the change in time will only be affecting the morning sessions. Lunch and afternoon committee session times will remain as they are written in the program. Also, if you have not already noticed, the African Union Committee will now be taking place in Dean Acheson Auditorium, which is the room we are in right now. And the Professional Development Workshop in the afternoon is now taking place in the Delegates Lounge, the room across from the registration desk, right through these doors. Please note, again, that the most up-to-date schedule is available electronically on that app, but for those of you who still prefer hard copies, we do have a limited amount printed out at registration for you. When I was in high school, about an eon ago, I loved to discuss and debate politics. And for those who know me, not much has changed over the years. I started in Model United Nations at the recommendation of a teacher, Dana Stubbart, who was an incredible Monument faculty member and has become a very close friend over the years. At the time, I wasn't really sure what I was getting myself into, but I knew I was no longer excited and challenged by the two-sided discussions that existed in the debate club that I was currently involved in. The first year, I had a binder about this big. I'm not joking. All of my country research fit into a binder about this big. Did I need it all? Probably not. Did I use it all? Most definitely not. But I was irresistibly hooked on researching countries and learning and doing deep dives on the issues that exist in those countries and the policies that they create. I became passionate about learning more about world affairs and the roles that countries play to shape our modern world. I even enjoyed learning some random facts that are not the most useful in debate, but could help me in getting a job on Jeopardy! Since high school until now, I've come full circle in my love and passion for Model UN. Throughout university, I continued to attend Model UN conferences, each time, no joking, with a binder this thick. and eventually became president of my Model UN team in university. I later returned to teach Model United Nations at my high school, the very one working alongside the faculty member who got me started. Aside from working on the standard skills that include public speaking, research, and writing that we all know that you helped develop and strengthen through Model UN, the skill that I developed the most, and the one that I was most interested in, was my ability to think critically. In practice, it meant discovering and connecting issues outside of their obvious connections that were being developed and connected through the media, policymakers, and others. I will note, I did not always win awards at conferences I attended. Once, I was almost even censured for debate during discussion. Delegates, I encourage you today to not focus on the awards. Instead, enjoy yourselves. Find what isn't there and challenge the understanding of the issues you may or may not always agree with. Some of my favorite countries that I represented throughout the years had policies I did not agree with. And having to defend what you may not agree with is an incredibly powerful tool, especially in creating understanding, empathy, and even strengthening your own argument next time you find yourself in the middle of a debate with a close friend. One thing that you may not understand now, but I hope you continue as you participate in Model United Nations or similar simulated activities, whether it be Model Arab League or Model NATO, is the incredible network of friends and professionals that you meet at conferences. When I moved to the United States, I was the only individual that I knew in Washington, D.C. was a friend from a Model UN conference that I had attended years ago at Harvard University. I cannot tell you the relief that I felt moving to a new city, a new country no less, and at least knowing one individual and knowing that we shared a special connection of the weekend at Harvard at University. There's a lot of power in today's youth. After all, you are the future. And I encourage you to take the skills and knowledge that you use today and do something with them. Whether it's organizing a community event, volunteering with a local nonprofit, getting involved with the United Nations Association of the National Capital Area, be sure to let your voice be heard. Dream bigger than some of the adults in this room can even imagine. And you may find yourself one day working or leading at incredible organizations like the US Department of State or the United Nations. Speaking of, some of you may have already had the privilege of meeting and working with the individual I'm about to introduce. But for those of you who haven't, let me tell you a little bit about Luis F. Mendes. Luis has been an incredible joy to work with over the past months, and a wonderful addition to the Global Classroom's DC team. I, among many of the students and adults in this room, are sad to see him be leaving UNA-NCA and return to the US Department of State this summer. Luis recently served at the US Embassy in Mexico City, where he led a team that focused on narcotic affairs. Prior to this assignment, Luis worked overseas in Senegal, where he managed US refugee protection and assistance programs. Luis has also worked in the department's Bureau of African Affairs and the 24-hour Crisis Management and Communication Center at the State Department. He has also served overseas in Casablanca, Morocco, Accra, Ghana, and he holds a master's degree from Columbia University. In his free time, he really enjoys long runs, and romantic comedies. Without further ado, please let me introduce Luis F. Mendes. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Megan, and the incredible UNA-NCA staff that I'm proud to call friends. As they say in my hometown of New York, how you doing? If you'll indulge me, I want to start with a story. About a month ago, one of my close college buddies, one of the most optimistic people you'll meet in your life, visited me in DC. After catching up, we started talking about recent events, and to my surprise, he rambled off a slightly depressing list that I want to share with you this morning. He said, "We're witnessing the highest level of displacement ever recorded. North Korea is on a relentless drive to build up its nuclear arsenal. The Islamic State threatens the free world. The planet is warming at alarming rates. Batman versus Superman, the movie, was such a letdown. And Lupe Fiasco's new album was shockingly bad. You get the point." Then he said, "Lou Dog, it's enough to make you feel bummed about the world." I smiled and said, "You know what? I'm actually feeling more optimistic today than I ever have." I went on to explain that my job over the last 9 months has entailed working with hundreds of inspiring middle and high school students in the Washington, D.C. area. Many of you here today. So to you, I say thank you for opening your classrooms, your hearts, and your minds. You're an incredible bunch of students that represent the best of what America has to offer the world. Nobody can stand where I'm standing, look at you, and feel bummed about the world. Here's why. I'm hopeful because you're not only smart here, but here. There's the group of former Burmese refugees that joined Model UN to better understand global displacement and are now helping new refugees in their communities. I'm hopeful because your passion for learning is infectious. There's the DC Middle School that started its own Model UN conference that is inspiring dozens of other middle schools in the DC area to think critically about global issues. I'm hopeful because you're bold and courageous. There's the first generation of Central American immigrants fighting to combat inequality in their neighborhoods, and the Iranian Americans out to dispel misconceptions about what it means to be Muslim in America, and so many other stories similar to these. I set out on this journey 9 months ago to inspire the next generation of global leaders, and along the way, you've inspired me. And the part that is so exciting is that your journey is just beginning. I think about all the amazing things that you're gonna do, and that lifts me up. So, don't listen to the naysayers because dreams still come true in America. It's one of the few places in the world where my improbable story is possible, where the son of a waiter and a seamstress who grew up poor in the housing projects of New York City could rise to become a US diplomat. For those still feeling down about the world, here's what I know. You're an incredibly resilient bunch, and while things may seem cloudy now, the clouds will pass. It may not be tomorrow or the day after, but know that a brighter day will come, I promise. One of the things that I've loved about being a United States diplomat is seeing how much good there is in the world, how many good people there are out there fighting the good fight without much fanfare or recognition. Ordinary people, just like me and you, doing extraordinary things. I saw it in the refugee camps of Africa, where relief workers were helping refugees in the most difficult of places. I saw it in the slums of Morocco, where courageous rap artists are using music as a platform to raise consciousness about dismal living conditions. I saw it in rural Mexico, where farmers use nonviolent actions to push for accountability and transparency. These individuals aren't any different from any of you. And whether you realize it or not, Model UN has already given you the skills that you need to be an agent of change in the world. It's taught you not to be afraid to fail, that finding common ground and developing consensus begins with listening, even to those you may not agree with, that allies and partners are important in advancing a position forward. So, ask yourself what your contribution to the world will be. Will you be a voice for the voiceless? Will you fight for justice and equality? Will you be an advocate for peace? Because I'm counting on you, America is counting on you, our planet is counting on you. Go out and make us proud. Thank you very much.
It's now my pleasure to introduce the U.S. Youth Observer to the United Nations, Nicole Perez. Please read her full bio in your program. You will be amazed, as I was, at how much incredibly good work a single person can achieve at such a young age. Born in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, Nicole immigrated to the United States at age 7. At the University of Florida, she was president of a student nonprofit that worked for sustainable impact around the world. She taught business classes in Guatemala to 50 single moms living in extreme poverty, enabling them to start their own businesses. From Uganda to Thailand to the Netherlands to New York City, her work to support entrepreneurship and sustainable community development has been felt throughout the globe, and she's been a strong supporter of the United Nations. She currently lives in San Francisco, where she works for Instagram, and I expect most of you know a lot more about Instagram than I do, right? Now, Nicole exemplifies the wonderful contribution that so many immigrants bring to the United States. We pride ourselves on being a nation of immigrants, and for good reason, as you are about to see.
I'm Nicole Perez, and I serve as the 5th U.S. Youth Observer to the United Nations. Being the Youth Observer to me means representing young people at the table, and not just any table, the decision-making table, where leaders are coming together and trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And that to me is super important because we're the largest youth generation ever. And so we need to be in those tables because we're the ones that are going to be driving those changes.
My name is Harsh Gupta, and I'm a genuine fellow for the Western region, and I'm a part of the UCLA chapter. Coming in from a different country, I honestly did not know we had a youth observer, but when I eventually found out that we did, it was honestly one of the most pleasant surprises I've got, because sometimes when you're in college or you're in high school, it feels like you don't really have a voice.
I applied to be the U.S. Youth Observer last year, and I didn't get it. And then I was just like, I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna work really hard this year and apply again next year. And so I did, and I got involved more with the UN Young Professionals program. I took on a leadership role there. I hosted a bunch of events to raise more awareness on the work of the UN throughout that year. I met a bunch of really great people, and then I applied again this year, and I got it. As Youth Observer, a lot of what I do is bring back everything I do in meetings with high-level officials at the UN or even at the US State Department, and then bring that back to young people in various ways. One of them is writing blog posts. So I write a lot about the people I meet, what I learn from them, the organizations I visit. Just came back from Dubai. I was at the World Government Summit with a team of people from the UN Foundation, and I was basically there to cover the event and bring people behind the scenes on Instagram. The biggest skill that young people have is building community, right? Because we have access to social media, and that's helping us get messages out there, scale messages, and bring people together as well.
I'm Veronica Doolin. I am the Gen UN Fellow for the Northeast region. I met Nicole over the summer when we were all introduced to the Youth Observer. She's there to provide a voice for the youth. She provides a voice at all of these events that she goes to, and as well as at the UN.
If I fast forward 5 years from now, the biggest thing I'll remember are conversations that I have with young people, especially the one-on-one conversations. There's a quote that Maya Angelou says that it's, you won't remember what people say, but you remember how they made you feel. And every time I talk to young people, I'm completely inspired and energized to do more, to be more. People should apply to be the U.S. Youth Observer because it's a role that really lifts other young people up with you. So when you're at the decision-making tables, a lot of what you're doing is bringing the stories that you see on the ground from young people into these tables, and then also connecting young people to the UN. And if we really want to accomplish the global goals, we need young people at these tables, and the U.S. Youth Observer really does that. The main message that I want to convey to young people really echoes what Ban Ki-moon told me when I first met him, which is have hope. Nothing can get done if we don't believe that we can get it done first.
Hello. I am always really afraid. Luckily today I wore heels, but normally I can't see over the podium because I'm so short. But I'm super happy to be here with all of you guys today. It's a true privilege to be speaking with you, and then to also be on the stage with incredible people that help make this event happen and that continue to support young people like you guys in your journey as leaders in this world. I want to give credit to the person that recorded this video and made me look much cooler than I really am. His name is Leo Mars. He's a 20-year-old student that's passionate about film and storytelling. Now, as the video mentioned, so a huge round of applause to Leo. I'll tell him that you guys applauded him. Now, the video mentioned that I have a privilege of traveling the country, speaking to young people like you guys and engaging with them online to learn about the issues they're most passionate about and bringing those issues to the table at the United Nations and even here at the US State Department. Being the US Youth Observer has been an absolute dream come true for me. It's a position that I never thought I would be in, not even in my wildest dreams. In the next few minutes I have with you guys, I want to share with you my journey to becoming the US Youth Observer, the lessons I've learned in this role, and why it's important for young people like you guys to participate in events like this one, and to find your voice in spaces where some of you might feel like you don't belong. Now, I moved to the United States when I was 7 years old from Bolivia. I remember the day we left as if it was yesterday. It was a scary experience because my family and I didn't know many people here in the US. I didn't speak English, and my parents struggled to make ends meet when we got here. But above all of those challenges, my parents had hope for my brother and me. Hopes that we'd get an education, hopes that we'd get good jobs, and hopes that we'd one day change the world in our own ways. Those hopes and dreams are what have driven me and pushed me in school, throughout college, and in my job at Instagram and as the US Youth Observer. However, many of those challenges I faced and my family faced affected me in ways that I didn't understand back then. I often felt I wasn't smart enough. I felt I didn't belong in many places, and I was often afraid to speak up. I joined Model United Nations as a junior in high school and vividly remember the fear that I felt as I walked into the conference. I was in the legal committee representing Bosnia and Herzegovina, a country that, when I was assigned, I barely knew how to point on a map to. I had done my research, but I was too afraid to speak up for most of the conference for fear of sounding dumb. I remember being in awe of the kids that quickly went around the room, engaging with others to draft resolutions and discuss their position on certain issues. And I remember feeling like I couldn't or shouldn't voice my thoughts and ideas because I didn't grow up speaking about international affairs at my dinner table, and I felt I didn't know as much as the other kids. And I found myself thinking this way many times throughout school, no matter how much I studied or read or prepared. This, however, changed when I got to college. I joined a school club called Nourish International, a national student-run nonprofit that empowers students to make a sustainable impact in communities around the world. As a freshman in college, I spent a year raising money around campus and later traveled to Guatemala City with 3 of my friends and invested that money in a community of female entrepreneurs living in extreme poverty. I remember arriving in Guatemala City and feeling complete hopelessness as I walked around these communities and saw the way that people lived there, heard these women's stories. I remember thinking that I was way in over my head to be there, that how could a freshman in college like me ever affect communities living in extreme poverty? But I quickly had to get over that. I was there in Guatemala City, and I needed to at least try to make an impact. So my friends and I immediately got to work. And we spent the summer conducting research, building lesson plans, and teaching business classes to women that went on to start 3 businesses that help support their families. We also wrote a small book on how to start a small micro enterprise that went on to be printed and used by multiple nonprofits in Guatemala City. Through that experience, I realized that oftentimes my insecurities got in my own way, that the negative thoughts I had and not my potential were the things that got in my way of accomplishing great things. I also saw the power that young people have to make an impact in the world, the power that we have when we use our voices to speak up for those that can't, when we focus our efforts and partner with experts and use the resources available to us, we can make significant changes. This experience changed my life and helped me gain the confidence I needed to go after bigger projects. I studied abroad in Bangkok, Thailand, where I worked with the largest nonprofit then moved to the Netherlands and helped start a business incubator with students and community leaders. And then when I graduated college, I moved to New York City, which was a dream come true for me, and decided to get more involved with the United Nations. Many of you might not know, or I guess you do now because you saw the video, but I applied to be the US Youth Observer to the UN once before and did not get it. But instead of taking that rejection as an affirmation that I did not belong in a space like the United Nations, I used it as fuel to work harder, to learn more, and to find other ways to get involved. So I joined the UN Young Professionals program and spent a year hosting events around New York City advocating on behalf of the work of the UN. And then I applied again, and now I'm here speaking to you guys as a US Youth Observer. The lesson here is to not be discouraged when you fail. Remember that you'll have to knock on many doors before one opens with an opportunity that you're willing to take on. As the US Youth Observer to the United Nations, I have the opportunity to participate in various events at the UN. In September, I participated at the UN General Assembly just a year after 193 world leaders came together to agree upon 17 global goals for sustainable development. How many of you guys have heard of these goals? Cool, so most of you. So you know that then they're a transformative plan of action to end extreme poverty, inequality, and climate disruptions by 2030. And young people like you are at the heart of these goals because we're the main drivers of them. Today, nearly half of the world's population is under the age of 25. So we are the largest youth generation ever. And organizations like the UN realize that if they want to solve some of the world's biggest problems, they need to engage with us, and they need to talk to us. That's why conferences like this one are so important, because they give you valuable skills that you'll use in your everyday lives. Skills like learning to find common ground with people that have opposing views, or speaking up in a room full of people, or critical thinking skills that help you connect unlikely dots that will lead you to new solutions. Now, I'm not gonna stand here and tell you that it's easy. Young people are amongst the most vulnerable people in the world and are disproportionately affected by issues like poverty, unemployment, food instability, and so on. And not just that, we're constantly told that we need to wait our turn, that we don't have enough experience, and are often stripped of our confidence and ability to think outside the box. Yet, despite these challenges, young people are finding opportunities to get involved, to make big changes, and to redefine the stereotypes that often make us out to be apathetic and slackers. As Youth Observer, I've gotten the chance to talk to young Americans that are making significant changes in their communities and around the world. I've spoken to Sarah Whipple, an 18-year-old from Texas that works with the International Rescue Committee to help resettled refugees assimilate into new communities. Or Ziad Ahmed, a 17-year-old high school student that started his own nonprofit to help build empathy in communities around the world. Or Kat de la Rosa, a young college student that partnered with her university to build an organization that tackles food waste on her campus. And many other students of all ages that have tackled issues that at first might have seemed way too big to conquer. After speaking with many young people around the country, I've learned 3 main lessons. The first, you can't do it alone. If you want to solve a problem in your community or around the world, we must partner with others. This includes other students, this includes people from other generations, it includes finding mentors that can help you focus your efforts or give you resources, whether they're teachers, parents, or your friends' parents. 2, the power of a story can move people into action. If you want others to get involved in your cause, tell them a story they can relate to. Telling compelling stories helps build empathy and spark action, and we have powerful tools to do that. Things like social media, although some of you might be a little too young to be on social media yet. For those of you that are, cat memes and selfies are great, but we can do so much more with those tools. And 3, never be afraid to ask questions. Don't let anyone stifle your curiosity. Humans are filled with wonder, and for some reason, I think that many people lose that as they grow older, except for the older people in this room. Don't let that happen. Asking questions helps you connect with others. It leads you to crack open a new book and go down paths you might have never discovered. Events like this one are a testament to the many efforts that the U.S. State Department and the United Nations Association is taking to make sure that young people like you guys are building the skills needed to be active and key participants in decision-making tables. And organizations across all sectors and industries need to harness your potential and the power you guys have to help them succeed. We are needed in institutions like the United Nations, where countries are coming together to tackle the challenges we all face as global citizens. So, why should we wait for a seat at the decision-making tables? The answer is, we shouldn't. If you don't like what you see around you, do something about it. Nothing in this world is somebody else's problem. So, before I end this speech, I want to take a moment to applaud all of you for being here. For being in this room. Being in this room is a first step to the many accomplishments that are to come for all of you. You might not feel it right now, because I certainly didn't feel it when I was in your shoes, but these experiences will stick with you for many years. Don't be afraid to ask questions, learn from each other, to think outside the box, and to speak up when you have something to say. You belong here, and your voices matter. Thank you. I think we have some time for Q&A, so if any of you guys have questions, feel free to come up.
If you're interested in having a question, please make your way to one of the 2 microphones there, and we'll take about, let's say, 4 questions. I think we have time for.
Cool.
Way to make this lower.
Lower it down if you need to.
Can you speak from there too? Yeah. So, becoming U.S. Youth Observer, I know you have to apply, but just curious, if you want to apply in the future, how many pages does it have to be inside?
So actually, the application is online. I'm not sure how many pages I had to do. You have to be 18 years or older to apply, but a lot of you guys are on the right track to becoming the U.S. Youth Observer. So I am certain that perhaps the future U.S. Youth Observer is sitting in this room. But you basically have to write, I think, 3 essays. Every year the application changes a little bit, but you have to write 3 essays explaining why you want to be the U.S. Youth Observer, why you think youth voices are important at the UN, and what issue you're most passionate about. And then you have to do a series of interviews with the State Department and folks at the UN Association.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey.
How long can you be a youth observer for?
Yeah, so the U.S. Youth Observer role is for 1 year, and every year they pick a new one.
What is your most memorable experience working as a U.S. Youth Observer?
Oh my gosh, that's really hard to choose. I've gotten a chance to do a lot of really cool things and travel a lot. So I've been able to travel to Rome to learn about the World Food Program and the Food and Agriculture Organization, to Dubai for the World Government Summit, and around the country. But I think aside from all of the really flashy and travel and international things, the most memorable experiences I've had have been talking to young people. Whether it's through Google Hangouts, if I can't travel to a city, or meeting them in person and listening to their stories, because that's been absolutely the most inspiring thing for me, listening to young people that are doing amazing things despite all the challenges they're facing.
How would you say your experience growing up in Bolivia and then moving to the United States shaped your vision for hope for youth in the United Nations and in the world?
That's a really good question. It's made me who I am. I don't think I would be here had I not been an immigrant. I think coming to the U.S., my parents came to the U.S. so that my brother and I could have more opportunities, and having that experience is what has fueled me, because I didn't want to let my parents down. And I wanted to make it worthwhile. And I think my parents had this vision, and they never imagined I would be here. I think the biggest thing they had dreamed of, they were like, Nicole's gonna graduate from an American university. And that was the craziest thing for them. When I graduated college, my dad was like, it was all worth it. Like, it was worth coming to the US, it was worth going through a lot of struggles. So it's shaped me because it's made me work really hard here. And being able, I feel like I'm living the American dream here, so that to me has been everything. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
What would be the biggest challenge for you as a youth observer?
The biggest challenge, I think, is, aside from the fact that there's literally just one of me, and the US is so big, other countries have the equivalent of a US youth observer. And so, for example, a country like Thailand has 4 youth observers or youth delegates, and the US has just me, so having to travel around the country is a little bit harder when it's just one person. And I also have to balance a full-time job at Instagram, so doing both has required me to be like super duper productive and to not waste my time, so I can do both things at once.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What modern world issue troubles you the most?
That's a really good question. Well, I'm going to come at it from a youth perspective, and from a lot of conversations I've had with young people here in the US, especially young people that are applying to college or graduating from college, and then also conversations I've had with other youth delegates from around the world. And one of the biggest ones is, well, one is youth unemployment around the world, and the fact that youth unemployment is affected by so many different things, like war and instability in different places, or lack of education in different countries, or even here in the United States, the youth unemployment rate is 3 times that of the regular one. And so the fact that young kids can't find a job or find a purpose in what they do, in what they've studied afterwards, really concerns me. But I think this has encouraged a lot of different programs to improve youth entrepreneurship so that young kids can find jobs and make a living. Cool. Yeah.
How many languages did you have to learn?
So I just know English, Spanish, and I'm currently learning French. But to be the US Youth Observer, you just have to know English.
Okay.
But it helps to learn other languages.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
What inspires you when you're feeling upset to continue going?
So the thing that inspires me the most are the young kids that I talk to, whether they're in college, high school, middle school, even elementary school, young kids that have seen a problem in their community and have said, I'm going to do something about it. Even when it seems like highly unlikely that it'll happen, a lot of young kids have been able to do amazing things. I was at the General Assembly in New York, and I sat next to a college student from Vietnam who had started the first hospital in his community, and I was like, what? Like, how can a college student start like a whole hospital? And he was like, yeah, I made it work, and I partnered with a lot of people, and things like that, and even stories from around the US of young kids doing amazing things inspires me, because I know that our future is going to be filled with leaders that are using modern technology and the knowledge that we have now to make the world a better place.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How much more time do we have? I'm going to do... Okay, sounds good. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. I'm going to do this question in Spanish.
Okay.
Okay. ¿Cuál es tu meta más grande para las Naciones Unidas con los jóvenes? Porque es un tema bien grande y yo veo que has cumplido muchas metas hasta ahora y quisiera saber cuál es lo que realmente tienes, cuál es tu visión para las Naciones Unidas y los jóvenes.
Bueno, o sea, I'll answer this in Spanish and then in English for those that don't speak Spanish. Para mí la cosa más importante es que los jóvenes se involucren más con las Naciones Unidas y que las Naciones Unidas siga creciendo programas como en el que yo estoy, como en el de US Youth Observer, en otros países que tal vez no tienen un joven que represente a los jóvenes en las Naciones Unidas. Así que mi visión es que más jóvenes sigan involucrándose en las Naciones Unidas y que las voces de los jóvenes estén presentes en cada decisión que haga las Naciones Unidas, porque al fin del día nosotros somos los que tenemos que, o sea, implementar todas las decisiones que están haciendo en las Naciones Unidas. She asked me about like what's my biggest vision for young people at the United Nations, and mine, I would say, is for the United Nations and for governments and for different sectors and organizations to continue to actively engage young people. It's a call to action to the UN, to governments, to make them key participants, make you guys key participants, to ask for your opinion, to engage with you meaningfully, and not just ask you to like share something on social media or do an action that you feel like is not as impactful. I'd love to see the youth delegate program at the United Nations grow much bigger than it is now. Today we have 66 youth delegates. I'd love to have every country have a youth representative so that youth voices are represented at the UN.
Gracias.
Gracias.
You stated that your parents came to America for you and your brother's opportunities. What has been your brother's opportunity?
My brother. My brother right now is an airplane mechanic. He fixes planes before they fly out. He's 22, he just turned 22. And yeah, he did aviation school and loves working with his hands and loves fixing planes and like plane engines.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this isn't really related, but what's your job on Instagram like?
Cool, yeah, I get this question a lot actually. I do product marketing and communications at Instagram, which means that I work with the businesses that have a presence on our platform, and I help them engage with people in a meaningful and non-annoying way, right? So if any of you guys are on Instagram, you might see like businesses on the platform. I try to make it so that those businesses don't annoy people. So that's my job, and that Instagram is a part of Facebook, so I get a chance to, it's one of like the craziest companies to work for. It's super cool, and we get free food all the time. So yeah, it's really, really awesome, and I get to do a lot of, I'm lucky because they let me do the role as U.S. Youth Observer alongside my work at the UN, at Instagram, so it's been an amazing experience, and they've been really supportive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. So sometimes there are like civil wars or disease outbreaks in other nations, and U.S. ambassadors or like other ambassadors might be in there. What kind of precautions do they have to take so that like they're not in that whole blunder? Like, are they still allowed to go around the city? Are there more or less severe precautions?
I'm actually not 100% sure on precautions because I'm not a U.S. ambassador, but do any of you guys know like procedure for when there's war? We'd have to ask an ambassador, but he might know. He knows.
So diplomats around the world have the opportunity to actually work in conflict environments. We have colleagues who are stationed in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, the world's most dangerous places, and we definitely have colleagues in the diplomatic security front who keep us safe, who provide us guidance on where we can travel, parts of the city that we can engage. So yes, there is a level of engagement that occurs.
Thank you.
All right, hi.
When you didn't get the role as the youth observer the first time, why didn't you give up?
I didn't give up because it comes back to like the resilience I've built, and I think it's for me it has been because of my experience coming to the U.S. And my parents really instilled a never give up or I'm not a quitter attitude in me. And so when I didn't get it, at first I was really upset by it. And I was like, you know what? I'm never applying to anything ever again. And then I was like, okay, I can't do that. Like, I'm going to apply again because I really want this. And so it was a combination of the attitude I grew up with in my household, but then also the fact that I was really passionate about the issues. I'm really passionate about the United Nations and its role in the world. And then I'm also extremely passionate about young people and giving more young people the opportunity to participate in things like this. And I just knew that I really wanted to do it, and I went for it again this year, and it was like the craziest thing that I got it to me. I was like, when I got it, I was like screaming and jumping up and down, and I was like on the street waiting for a bus. But yeah, I applied again because I was really passionate about the work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hi. As a youth observer, do you help make decisions on solving the issues that young people face around the world?
Yeah, so a lot of what you get to do is like have input on resolutions. So when a resolution happens, what you do, or when a resolution is being drafted, and especially if it's relating to youth, they bring in like youth organizations, they talk to youth delegates, and you get a chance to like work with the State Department, alongside the State Department, to give input on like, based on conversations you've had with other young people. So my role really is to be the voice of young Americans. And so when a resolution comes up and we're talking about language, it's a matter of me coming and saying, here's what I've heard from young people in the US, and here's what I think should be on there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're just going to take the last 4 questions at the microphone. If you have another question, sorry, you'll have to stay in the seat, so we'll take 4 more. Okay?
Cool, sounds good. Hey there.
During your speech earlier, I couldn't help but notice how confidently you spoke. I myself struggle with speaking publicly, and it's worse at Model UN conferences. So I would just like to ask, what's your biggest piece of advice for someone like me who struggles with words?
Yeah, you know, this is really hard. I get this question often, and when I was in Model UN, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like basically almost a mute. Like, I was so afraid to speak up, but I think I was afraid because I kept having these thoughts to myself saying like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of saying something dumb. I don't think I'll like say anything significant. And the way that I've gotten over that is by building my confidence, and I've built my confidence through like continuously preparing myself. And when I feel like, okay, you know what, I've studied enough, I know these issues, I have something to say, my advice would just, it's hard because it's just do it, go after it. And like when you start, at first it'll be hard, but don't get discouraged if at first it doesn't go as you want. Practice makes perfect. I practiced the speech in my hotel room like 10 times before I came up here. So practice and then be prepared, like know your stuff.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
How do you feel that your experiences as a U.S. Youth Observer have connected you to the world?
Oh my gosh, so much. Well, one, because as U.S. Youth Observer, I also get to engage with other young people in other countries. So, for example, yesterday here at the State Department, I got a chance to video chat with Nepalese students that were doing Model UN there in Nepal. I've gotten a chance to speak to young people all over Latin America and young people in Southeast Asia. So as Youth Observer, you get a lot of opportunities to engage with young people, especially young people that are in programs that are funded and led by the U.S. State Department in other countries. So you get a chance to speak to them and learn about their experiences. And then also I've gotten a chance to engage with other youth delegates at the UN. So other young people that, like me, that are representing young people in their own countries. And I've gotten a chance to have meetings with them and talk about issues for young people around the world. So I've felt really connected to them just because I've had those opportunities.
Thank you.
Very sorry for the last 2 individuals at the microphone. I know you said you'd have a chance to speak. We're just having a small change in our program. So I think you're sticking around for a little bit after opening ceremony. So if you want to, you can come approach Nicole afterwards, and she'll be happy to answer those questions for you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for coming out to Washington, D.C. for this event. We really appreciate you taking the time to come out here and all the amazing work that you're doing as the U.S. Youth Observer to the UN. One more round of applause, please, for Nicole Perez. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to this year's Global Classrooms D.C. Secretary General, Steve Mirabello.
Welcome to the Global Classrooms DC 13th Annual Spring Model UN Conference. My name is Steve Mirabello, and I'm honored to be the Student Secretary General for this conference. I would like to thank the U.S. Department of State, the Pan American Health Organization, conference staff, faculty advisors, and of course, you, the delegates, for attending this conference. I first participated in Model UN 2 years ago in 6th grade, and have since attended 8 conferences, all of which I greatly enjoyed. The GCDC Annual Spring Conference is one of my favorites. It brings together over 500 students to discuss critical issues in our complex world. As we gather at the U.S. Department of State and PAHO, we are reminded diplomacy is critical to solving conflicts. Each country and region has its own interests, making it difficult to reach compromises benefiting every party. The UN is remarkable in that, despite this inevitable friction, it is able to bring countries together to pass resolutions that ultimately help the international community. This ability of the United Nations to foster compromise is important, as when one issue is taken care of, often another arises.
Incredibly sorry, you just arrived in the hallway, okay? Sorry.
Welcome to the GCDC 2017 13th Annual Conference.
I'm so sorry to cut that short, Steve, but if everybody could please remain in their seats, we do have a special individual coming to speak at this year's opening ceremony. So if I can ask you to all remain seated, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Well, I had a surprise for you, but I guess it's really not a surprise anymore, is it? It's my distinct honor to introduce to you the 69th U.S. Secretary of State, Rex W. Tillerson. Rising through the ranks to become chief executive of one of the world's largest global corporations, Secretary Tillerson understands well the interconnected global economy in which we all live and work. Rising through the Boy Scouts to become a distinguished Eagle Scout and eventually the President of Boy Scouts of America, he's also been dedicated in many ways to public service. Of special significance for us today, Secretary Tillerson chaired the United Nations Security Council meeting last Friday. The presidency of the Security Council rotates each month among its 15 member states. In April, the United States was the chair. Secretary Tillerson's strong statements in support of global cooperation in addressing North Korea's nuclear and missile programs is in the tradition, the great bipartisan tradition of U.S. leadership at the United Nations over the past 72 years. And if we've learned anything from history, it is that the UN is most effective when the United States leads. So let's give a warm welcome to Secretary Rex Tillerson.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning to all of you, and welcome to the United States Department of State. It really is a delight to be here with all of you, and in particular, this generation, the next generation of leaders for our country. And so I welcome this opportunity to speak to you, and in particular, I think there couldn't be a more appropriate place for you to hold your annual Model UN Conference than right here at the State Department. I would like to recognize the United Nations Association, great partner of ours. Special thanks to Paula Boland, Megan Penn for all the work they put into making this particular opportunity for you a success. And of course, to Ambassador Don Bliss, President of the UN Association of the National Capital Area. Again, to all of you, it is quite invigorating and heartening to see your interest at this stage of your life, to express this interest in affairs that will affect your life. They are affecting your life today. They're going to affect your life in the future. But the fact that you take an interest in what is going on around you, the world around you, and a desire to understand it, and a desire to ultimately participate in it, because that's really what is most important. And I think the opportunities you're going to have today to examine, come to grips with some of the challenges that we're confronted from a national security standpoint, some global environmental challenges, global health challenges. These are all of the same issues that I spend my days thinking about, and my colleagues here at the State Department spend their days thinking about, engaging with our partners around the world, not just to talk about them, but to find solutions. And how do we move those forward to actually address some of these daunting challenges that confront our world today. I think as you have the opportunity through the participation today, through your committee meetings, through your moderated debates, these are all great opportunities to first exercise your critical thinking skills. They are unique to you. Each of you have your perspectives, and they're valuable. And that's what gives us the opportunity to progress on these issues, is your active participation, practicing those critical thinking skills, learning how to express your opinions, your views in a way that is persuasive to others. All of that is extremely valuable to your development as an individual, your development as a future leader, but ultimately your development as a great citizen of this country. Because whether you become actively engaged in the future in our public affairs, foreign affairs, or whether you choose some other career path, the most important thing you will carry forward out of your participation today is you'll be a better citizen. You'll be a better member of your community. You'll be more influential to help others around you understand how important these issues are. You know, I think it is important that everyone understand no single nation, not even as powerful as the United States of America is, can solve these problems all on our own. For the U.S., we spend a lot of our time advancing these dialogues through the United Nations. It is a body that's important to how we address threats to national security, to peace in the world. And I think if you look at the UN's own charter, it says one of the great purposes of this body is, and I quote, "save succeeding generations from the scourge of war." And that will be our greatest contribution if we're able to advance on a number of fronts to lessen conflict in the world today. And it is really important, it's really important, your participation today, to help us build a new generation of leaders. And as I said, regardless of what path you may choose in the future, your participation, I think what you will experience from the opportunity today is going to develop you personally, and it's going to develop you as a leader in the future as well. I'm often asked, what is the most important leadership trait? And so I want to take a moment to speak to that, because it's always an easy answer for me. It is your personal integrity. You know, your personal integrity is something that we don't train your integrity. We don't teach that to you. You're born with it. You're born with your personal integrity. It's the most valuable asset you have as an individual. And how you use that integrity to strengthen you can be an incredibly strong future asset to you as well. And that means being honest with people. It means not taking shortcuts, following the rules. It means resisting the temptation of peers, and there's a lot of pressure that comes on you at this age in your life where people are telling you, hey, it's okay to cheat, everybody does it. It's okay to take this shortcut, everybody does it. That is testing your personal integrity. Now, no one can take your personal integrity from you. Only you can give it up. And you relinquish it when you choose these wrong paths. And all of you know the difference. You know what's right. You know what's wrong. It's hard. It's hard sometimes to resist that. But that's how you strengthen your personal integrity. Because I can tell you, once you give it up, it is extremely hard to get it back. It will be the most powerful asset you will carry forward in your life, no matter what you choose to do. Because people's belief in your honesty and your integrity gives you power like you cannot imagine. And so I encourage you to protect your personal integrity in every decision you make every day. It's going to serve you no matter what you choose to do in the future. Now, we hope some of you will think about choosing careers in the Foreign Service field, because it's a wonderful way to spend your life. The dedication of the people here at the State Department can tell you the career paths they've chosen are extraordinarily rewarding. They come with their challenges, but the opportunity to serve our country and to live in some interesting parts of the world and to deal with others in different cultures as to how we're going to move forward on these daunting challenges ahead of us is extremely rewarding. And so hopefully some of you will catch that bug, and we may see you back here at the State Department in the future in a career foreign service role or civil service role. We would welcome that. But again, regardless of the path you choose, I hope what you get out of today's participation, again, makes you a more engaged individual, helps with your critical thinking skills, and is going to serve you well regardless of what you choose to do in the future. So thanks for being here. I hope you have a great day. You learn some things. Importantly, have fun doing it. That's important. I think we've
time for 2 questions?
Yeah, I think we've got time for a couple of questions.
You want to come up to the mic?
Sorry, the individuals for the questions have been pre-chosen, so if I could have everybody please stay in your seats, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Alejandra Jimenez. I'm in the 6th grade, and I go to Elliott High Middle School. My question is, what is your source of inspiration in what you've been... Oh, my goodness. What is your source of inspiration in the work you do as the Secretary of State?
Well, my source of inspiration is really the colleagues around me. I have tremendous professionals who have devoted their lives to advancing America's interests, America's values, our values for freedom, our values for human rights, our values for protection of individuals, and then our values of national security. So here at the State Department and my colleagues in the other cabinets, in particular the Department of Defense, where we have very close working relationships with, these are the men and women in uniform who are protecting our freedoms day in and day out. And when I see their dedication and the sacrifice they make, it inspires me to be a good leader for them and to support them and to ensure that I'm delivering in all times on the messages that we need to advance America's interest as well in national security and foreign affairs. So I'm blessed to have wonderful colleagues around me, and I draw a lot of my inspiration from them. Great question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nadia Roghani, and I'm an 11th grader from Muslim Community School in Potomac. So, Secretary Tillerson, Syria has been mired in war for 6 or more years now. According to published reports, conditions are not getting much better. In fact, they're only getting worse. My question to you is, what can the United Nations do to bring this war to an end? The pain is too much, the death is too much, the refugee crisis itself is too much. Something must be done.
Well, Syria is probably our most complex, complicated challenge, I think, confronting not just the United States, but the global community, and I think you phrased it that way. We have 2 significant conflicts going on inside of Syria. We have the war against ISIS, to defeat ISIS, an organization that has been the most brutal in terms of its acts against others and its desires to extend that brutality around the world, to harm others, and in particular to harm Americans right here at home. So we have a war against ISIS going on inside of Syria, but within that there is a Syrian civil war going on, opposition forces to the Bashar al-Assad regime, which is a regime that's been very brutal to its own people, has used chemical weapons against its own people, has shown disregard for its citizens by bombing its own citizens. So this is an extremely complicated situation. There are now between 4 and 5 million Syrian refugees have left the country, and more than 400,000 people have been killed since this conflict began. Our approach to it is to put together a global coalition on two fronts. One is to win the conflict against ISIS. We must defeat ISIS and remove them as a threat to the global community, but they also remove them as a destabilizing force inside of Syria, so we can then get to the issues that are really unique to the Syrian people. And there, what we're hoping to achieve is to put in place some ceasefire agreements. In certain regions of Syria, we believe we have the opportunity to have parties come together and agree to ceasefires, create zones of what we call stabilization to keep conflict from breaking out, allow the humanitarian aid to come in to those areas, and then ultimately, if we can get a peace process underway through the Geneva peace talks under auspices of the United Nations, we're hopeful that we can bring the parties together and develop a new constitution for Syria going forward, one that's going to likely require a power-sharing arrangement that will no longer allow for a dictatorship in the country. It's going to be a very long process. What I would tell you is there's an enormous commitment on the part of the global community to address the suffering in Syria, ultimately restore conditions so people can go home and rebuild their communities, rebuild their homes. And there's significant commitment around the world of funds. We're already lining up the monies from Europe, the Middle East, and other donor countries who are ready to help Syria rebuild, but only under the right conditions where Syria's future is one of a positive future. A very difficult situation, heartbreaking to watch what happens there, but I can tell you the resolve of the global community to address Syria is strong. It's not going to be easy, but it's something that we're all committed to move forward on. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Listen, again, thank all of you. I hope you have a terrific day, and again, learn something, have fun.
I know it's been a while. If you don't mind, I do want to give Steve a chance to finish his speech. So if you just don't mind sitting a little longer.
I'll start from the top. Welcome to the Global Classroom's DC 13th Annual Spring Model UN Conference. My name is Steve Mirabello, and I'm honored to be the Student Secretary General for this conference. I would like to thank the U.S. Department of State, the Pan American Health Organization, conference staff, faculty advisors, and of course, you, the delegates, for attending this conference. I first participated in Model UN 2 years ago in the 6th grade and have since attended 8 conferences, all of which I greatly enjoyed. The GCDC Annual Spring Conference is one of my favorites. It brings together over 500 students to discuss critical issues in our complex world. As we gather at the U.S. Department of State in Pejo, we are reminded how diplomacy is critical to solving conflicts. Each country and region has its own interests, making it difficult to reach compromises benefiting every party. The UN is remarkable in that, despite this inevitable friction, it is able to bring countries together to pass resolutions that ultimately help the international community. This ability of the United Nations to foster compromise is important, as when one problem is taken care of, often another arises. Dealing with each new issue requires creativity and a willingness to look at problems from different perspectives. In the words of Albert Einstein, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. For example, when we needed more energy for our growing population, we exploited the abundance of fossil fuels, which in turn contributed to the issue of climate change and the danger it poses to the world as we know it. Today, in addition to climate change, delegates will address the ongoing difficulties plaguing war-torn Somalia, the struggle faced by African nations providing the basic right of primary education, the problems accessing sufficient resources in the world's growing cities, and securing basic human rights called for in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for the many refugees in the world. Your challenge as delegates is to think intuitively and recognize the priorities of each represented country, then draft and pass appropriate resolutions in response. While globalization and advancements in technology have benefited many, they have also created a new set of problems which require urgent solutions. So, as we attempt to solve climate change through harnessing renewable energy sources, we will face new challenges such as impact on wildlife, a displaced workforce, and inconstant energy production. The issues that will come with renewable energy sources are among the ones the UN must work to resolve. I find the work that goes into creating and passing a resolution very rewarding. When I successfully incorporate many points of view into a resolution and it passes, I feel like I accomplished something worthwhile. So today, use creative thinking to solve some of the problems in our world, and remember to have fun. So with these thoughts, I officially open the GCDC 2017 Spring Model UN Conference.